Imagine waking up before sunrise because someone is pounding on your front door. You hear shouting outside. Then the door comes crashing open, and suddenly your home is full of police officers. They tell you they traced illegal online activity back to your internet connection. You know you didn't do what they're accusing you of, but the police already have your name, your address, and your IP address. And here's the frightening part. Your IP address does not automatically tell police who was actually behind the keyboard. A network can be shared, a router can be hacked, a password can be compromised, a guest can use your connection, another device inside your home can be infected. Yet, when investigators see an IP address connected to suspicious activity, that address can become the starting point for a much bigger investigation. That's why this isn't just about internet security. It's about protecting your home, your privacy, and yourself from being mistaken for someone who used your network for something illegal. In this video, we're going to break down how an IP address can become connected to a police investigation, what you should do if officers show up at your door, and the practical steps you can take right now to make your Wi-Fi network harder for anyone else to abuse. Let's begin with the most important thing to understand. Your IP address is not your identity. Think of it more like an address associated with your internet connection than a fingerprint that proves who was using it at a particular moment. If investigators trace online activity back to your connection, that can point them toward your home, but it doesn't automatically answer the most important question. Who actually committed the activity? The source material describes several situations where people were reportedly caught in investigations because suspicious activity was traced to their internet connection. In one example involving Buffalo, investigators reportedly raided a home after associating online activity with the household's IP address. The investigation later indicated that someone else had been using or compromising the network, leaving the innocent occupant to deal with the consequences of the police response, even though no charges ultimately followed. Another example described in the source involved a woman in Evansville, Indiana. Police reportedly believed an IP address connected to her home was associated with an online threat and executed a search while she was inside. The account says the network had been open, meaning other people may have been able to use it. The important lesson isn't that every IP-based investigation ends this way. It's that identifying the internet connection does not necessarily identify the person responsible. The source also describes a situation involving people operating a Tor exit node. If you've never heard that term, here's the basic idea. Tor is designed to route internet traffic through multiple layers and relays, helping obscure the original source of that traffic. The final relay, known as an exit node, connects the traffic back to the broader internet. From the perspective of the website receiving the connection, the exit node may appear to be the source. That creates an obvious investigative problem. A suspicious connection can appear to come from one location, even though the person responsible is somewhere else. The source material describes people whose network was reportedly associated with suspicious traffic, even though they were functioning as a relay rather than the original source. The same basic problem can occur with shared or compromised networks. If a neighbor gains access to your Wi-Fi, if someone figures out an old password, or if a device connected to your router becomes compromised, your internet connection can potentially become associated with activity you didn't personally perform. That's why securing your network matters. But before we get to the router settings, let's talk about what happens if police actually appear at your front door. The first mistake people make is assuming they have to open the door simply because police are standing outside. You don't have to volunteer access to your home merely because an officer knocks and asks to come inside. A knock at the door is not automatically the same thing as a warrant. And if officers are asking for permission to enter, that's a request for consent. So if you open the door and officers ask whether they can come inside, don't casually say yes because you assume you've done nothing wrong. You can calmly state that you do not consent to a search. You don't need to become confrontational. You don't need to lecture the officer about constitutional law, and you don't need to physically block them. Just make your position clear. I do not consent to a search. If they ask questions about your internet connection, you do not have to start explaining your entire household, every device you own, and everything you've ever done online. The more you say under pressure, the more opportunities there are for misunderstandings, contradictions, or statements to be taken out of context. There's another tactic to watch for, the suggestion that a warrant is coming. An officer may say something like, "If you don't let us in, we'll just come back with a warrant." That statement doesn't mean they currently have one. You don't have to give consent simply because an officer tells you that refusing consent might lead to a warrant. Whether police can actually obtain one depends on the evidence and the legal standard applicable to the situation. There's also a subtler version of consent. Imagine you've already opened the door and allowed an officer to step inside for some reason. The officer walks toward your router and says, "I just want to take a quick look at this." You never explicitly said yes. You also never explicitly said no. That ambiguity can create problems because police may later characterize your behavior as permission. That's why clarity matters. If you do not consent to a search, say so clearly and calmly. And then there's the emergency argument. Officers may sometimes claim they need immediate access because they believe an emergency exists, or because they believe evidence is about to be destroyed. Those circumstances can matter legally, and the exact rules depend on the facts and jurisdiction. But you should not assume that simply saying emergency automatically gives officers unlimited authority. If police claim they have a warrant, ask to see it. You can ask that they provide or show it in a way that allows you to inspect it. Don't physically interfere with officers if they are legally authorized to enter. Your priority should be keeping yourself safe, making your lack of consent clear, and documenting what happens when you're legally able to do so. Now let's move from the front door to the actual Wi-Fi network. The first step is changing the administrator password on your router. Do not continue using the default administrative credentials that came with the device. Your Wi-Fi password and your router's administrator password serve different purposes, and both should be strong and unique. Next, use modern Wi-Fi security whenever your equipment supports it. The WPA2 or WPA3 are the common options you'll encounter on modern routers. The exact menu names will vary by manufacturer, but the goal is to prevent unauthorized devices from joining your network. Also avoid using your full name, street address, apartment number, or other personally identifying information as your Wi-Fi network name. You don't need to broadcast exactly who owns the network to everyone nearby. Then look at remote administration. If your router allows people to manage it from outside your home, ask whether that feature is actually necessary. Unnecessary remote access creates another potential avenue that you may not want exposed. Another useful step is creating a guest network. If friends, visitors, or other people need internet access, they don't necessarily need to be placed on the same network as your personal computers, phones, cameras, printers, and smart home devices. A separate guest network can help isolate their devices from your primary network. And here's something people often forget. Regularly check which devices are connected to your router. If you see a device you don't recognize, don't simply assume it's one of yours. Investigate it. Change your Wi-Fi password if necessary, remove unknown devices, and review the security settings. You should also keep your router's firmware up to date. Manufacturers release updates that can fix security vulnerabilities and improve the device's protection. Your router should also have its firewall enabled if that feature is available. The source material also mentions MAC address filtering as an additional control. This can help restrict access to approved devices in some environments, although it should be understood as an extra layer rather than a complete security solution. And then there's the question of a VPN. A VPN can add privacy by encrypting traffic between your device and the VPN provider, and can make the public-facing IP address seen by websites different from the IP address assigned directly to your home connection. But a VPN is not magic. It doesn't make you anonymous. It doesn't prevent police from investigating you through other evidence. And it doesn't guarantee that an online investigation cannot eventually be connected to you. Think of it as one layer in a larger security and privacy strategy. Not a guarantee that you'll never be identified. Now let's address one of the most common objections. My Wi-Fi has a password, so I'm safe. Maybe. But that depends on how strong the password is, whether it's unique, whether the router still uses default administrative credentials, whether old devices remain connected, and whether you've enabled features that you don't actually need. Another person might gain access because they know an old password. A guest might continue using a device that you forgot about. A compromised device could become a problem, or your router itself could have outdated firmware. The point is not to live in fear. It's to treat your Wi-Fi like the digital front door to your home. You wouldn't deliberately leave your front door unlocked and hand strangers the key. Your network deserves the same level of basic attention. And if police ever do come to your home claiming that your IP address was connected to illegal activity, remember the distinction between an internet connection and the person responsible for the activity. Stay calm. Don't volunteer a search. Don't guess. Don't start inventing explanations. Ask whether they have a warrant. If they do, ask to see it. If they don't, clearly state that you do not consent to a search and that you want to remain silent and speak with a lawyer before answering substantive questions. And if officers enter despite your objection, don't physically resist them. Focus on safety and documentation. Because once the police report is written, the most important evidence may come down to what can actually be proven. Security footage, router logs, device records, account information, and other digital evidence can potentially help establish what happened. Finally, remember that the laws governing digital privacy are not identical everywhere. Federal law, state law, the type of information sought, and the exact investigative circumstances can all change the analysis. The source material points to states with different approaches to electronic privacy, but you should not assume a simple list of strong and weak states tells you everything about your rights. Your best defense is understanding the technology, securing the network, knowing how to respond at the door, and preserving evidence if something goes wrong. Your IP address is a clue. It is not automatically a confession, And your Wi-Fi network is not just something you use to stream movies anymore. It is part of the digital footprint of your home, so lock it down. Change the administrator password. Use strong wireless encryption. Disable unnecessary remote access. Separate guests from your primary network. Check connected devices. Keep your firmware updated. Consider a VPN when it makes sense for your privacy needs. And most importantly, know what to say if police show up asking questions about something that happened through your connection. I do not consent to a search. I'm not answering questions without a lawyer. Stay calm. Stay respectful. Protect your network. And don't assume that because an investigation points to your IP address, it automatically proves you were the person behind it. Because when someone else uses your Wi-Fi, the wrong person can end up at your front door. And the best time to secure that digital front door is before the police ever come knocking.